Busy day for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Too busy for the liking of some players. We'll talk about the cuts that were made today in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Exactly what we are. We are your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, and my name is Tony Wiggins. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube or audio-wise. Make sure you tap in each and every day so you do not miss an episode. And shout out to the everydayers who join us every single day. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by FanDuel. That's right, FanDuel. Now listen very closely. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Glad you guys can join me today. I usually go all the way to the back and come back up to the front, but we're not going to bury it today. We're going to get right to it. Cuts have been made. I will not wait any longer. I'm going to tell you right now who they are, and some of them are shockers. Tight end Sean Bowman. I'm just going to go in the list the way Jaguars PR sent it. Tight end Sean Bowman. Cornerback Christian Braswell in a big surprise. I recall when defense coordinator Ryan Nielsen, when the initial depth chart came out and Christian Braswell was listed as the starting nickel, he said it's insane. That means it could change. It has changed drastically. I did a show yesterday. I thought Braswell was on the team. Gary Brightwell, who showed a lot, really showed a lot, in my opinion, did not make it. Joshua Cephas, a lot of smoke about him early in the process. Later on, not so much. DJ Coleman, who we really featured yesterday when we were talking about edge rushers. Defensive end DJ Coleman, I praised him for going through the process and making the team. Did not make it. Some of these guys will be practice squad participants, and I think if he clears waivers, he has a good chance to come back. Wide receiver Elijah Cooks, who had really been like that sixth receiver all summer, and I thought that I would see Tim Jones's name on here before I saw his. I was wrong. Elijah Cooks, 6'5", played well. It looked like they gave him a whole bunch of opportunities. He's another guy who could possibly be back on the franchise tag. On the practice squad. These are the guys who were waived. All right. Eric Hallett, the second. A lot of hope for him. Never really got traction. Eric Hallett has been waived by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Running back Jalen Jackson, also waived. That means the Jaguars have 3 running backs on their club, and maybe they're thinking about using Devin Duvernay, in my opinion, where he played a little bit in Baltimore. That is probably the emergency plan to put him back there. Offensive lineman Stephen Jones is waived. Quarterback E.J. Perry, no surprise, was just bought in for 1 week during the preseason. Waived. Josh Proctor, the safety, waived. Austin Trammell, wide receiver. He's another guy that I thought would be right behind Cephas because of his value on special teams, and he really put up the numbers and did everything you could ask him to do. Wade will not be with the team unless he makes the practice squad. And offensive line, Darrell Williams. I thought Darrell Williams had a shot. And I thought Darrell Williams had a shot because I thought Darrell Williams would be the dude that displaced Tyler Shatley. Hold on for a minute. I got to tell you something. Waived because of injury is tight end Patrick Murtaugh, who looked good at times. Now, release, not subject to waivers. Safety Adrian Amos. No surprise to me. I said when they brought in Tayshaun Gibson, and with the way that Edmonds had played in the offseason, Terrell Edmonds, I said that I didn't think Adrian Amos would make it. He did not. Had a very quiet preseason. Josiah Dugara. He really played well. A smaller tight end, sort of like Evan Ingram light a little bit, like a Jonnu Smith type of person. Did not make it. Terrell Edmonds did not make this football team. Cornerback Trey Flowers did not make this football team. Defensive end Joe Gaziano, who was just recently bought in, did not make the team. Blake Hance released. Offensive lineman Blake Hance. That means Cole Van Lannon is in really good shape. Linebacker Tanner Muse, no, I didn't think he was going to get it. Cornerback Amani, I hope I say this right, Oruwari, yep, I think that's it, did not make it. And Tyler Shatley, 11 years of being able to make the Jacksonville Jaguars, did not make it. So the Tyler Shatley joke that I have told so often is now gone. Released with the injury settlement is quarterback C.J. Beathard. Placed on injury reserve, designated the return of both Dewey Wingard, the safety, and rookie running back Keelan Robinson. And then placed on reserve, suspended as expected, Tayshaun Gibson. So, who does that leave at all of these positions? And does that mean that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be in the market to do some things? We talked yesterday about the edge position. DJ Coleman yesterday was listed as the backup to Josh Allen. He's gone, right? He's no longer here. That would mean that they do view Eric Armstead as a guy who can go out and give them a little bit in reserve on the defensive end. What it also means is, as of right now, Miles Cole made it. Miles Cole, who I told everybody I thought he looked really, really good at times. He has that big, long body. Drafted this year out of Texas Tech on day 3. So far, he is on this team. There's still a week left before the season starts, a little bit more than a week. Come Monday, you got to see who's on this roster Monday when they start preparing for their first game against Miami. On the list, or not on the list of cuts, Yasir Abdullah, another player we profiled and talked about. I think his versatility being a third down pass rusher, as well as his potential to be a Sam linebacker and be stout, helped him so far. We are going to see if that maintains. But apparently, it looks pretty good to somebody over there. So let's run through the DBs real quick, because what we're going to do in segment 2, we're going to hit positional rankings after these cuts, and we're going to say where they need a boost if they're going to possibly look around the waiver wire or facilitate a trade. I thought they were going to trade some of these guys. It looks like now they're going to be trading for other people's players if that's what they decide to do. They did move on yesterday from Trevis Gibson and sent him to Seattle for a conditional 6th-round pick, I believe. So let's look at this. Roy Robinson-Harris is obviously still here. Adam Gostis is not on that list, so he's still here right now. Of course, Jordan Jefferson and Jeremiah Ledbetter and Tyler Lacey. The Jaguars appeared to stick with people they are used to and familiar with. To go along with that, Eric Armstead, Devon Hamilton, Trayvon Walker, and Josh Allen. So there you go. The Jaguars have made their decisions of the defensive line. You can compare and contrast that to what we talked about yesterday with our podcast yesterday. A lot of movement, a lot of things that are unexpected. We'll continue to go through this when we get to segment 2, and then we're going to start ranking these units. I'm a little bit shocked by all of this. You can tell by the delay in some of my opinions. But it just caught me by surprise. I was about to record, and we were going to talk about some of the things we were talking about now, but this happened. We got the email from PR. All of the media types got the email from PR, and immediately I was just blown away and shocked at some of these cuts. We're going to look at all of these units. I'm going to rank them too, but let's diagnose who's still with the team and who's no longer on, who's not on the cut list. We'll do all of that with the DBs, the wide receivers, as well as running backs, offensive line, everybody else. We'll get to all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Man, I've been talking about FanDuel ad nauseum. You guys know that. Always talking about FanDuel. You heard us all here on Locked On talk about FanDuel because it's America's #1 sports book. Well, we got something a little bit different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's right. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. $5. You get a three free week trial, week trial for free on NFL Sunday Ticket and from YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. Listen, man, the cuts have come in. A lot of surprises. Of course, let's run through the offensive linemen real quick that are still on the roster. We're just going to go numerically. Javon Foster is still here. Of course, Mitch Morse, Brandon Sheriff, that's 3. Cole Van Lannon, 4, who came on at the end of training camp. Walker Little is still here. The Jaguars have not given up. Cam Robinson, Cooper Hodges, Ezra Cleveland, Anton Harrison, and Luke Fortner. Luke Fortner is going to hang around. They haven't given up. And one thing about Trent Baalke, Trent Baalke has a reputation now of not giving up on guys, and apparently that's the case here. To look at the defensive backs, of course, Andre Cisco, Darnell Savage are both still on the team. So is Daniel Thomas. Daniel Thomas got a little bit banged up, but guess what? He's here. Jarian Jones, that's 4. DeAndre Prince is 5. Ronald Darby is 6. Antonio Johnson is 7. Monteric Brown, Buster Brown is 8. Tyson Campbell is 9. There you go. So the Jaguars are keeping so far 9 DBs, a lot of versatility in that group. And it's just amazing to me, man. I didn't expect some of these names to be on here. I really, really thought Terrell Edmonds played well. Now, keep in mind, some of those folks will be on the practice squad if they don't get picked up by other people. Caleb Johnson is still on the list, and he was one of the people that I highlighted early in training camp with his speed and his ability to cover. And there's a theme here, and I'm going to tell you exactly what that theme is here in just a second. So you have at linebacker, Foye Oluokun, of course, Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma, Ventrell Miller, Caleb Johnson, and Yasir Abdullah. They're keeping 6. If they're keeping 6, I think they look at Abdullah as a little bit of a two-way guy. I think I saw him lined up at defensive end yesterday. He's a versatile piece. He has a very unique body build, and the way he's put together is different from anybody else on the team. It really is. The kid's like 6'2", like 250 pounds, but he can run. So he has a vast experience of standing up, being down, and I think he's a really, really, truly hard worker with some get off, and he can really tackle. So that doesn't surprise me. 3 tight ends on this team. 3. That's a little bit shocking, but not really. Getting to the wideouts, obviously you got Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Parker Washington, Devin Duvernay, and Christian Kirk. Those 5, and then Tim Jones, who you didn't see a whole bunch from or hear a whole bunch from in training camp, especially if you were a part of the media contingent. However, here's what you did get. You do have with Tim Jones, with Caleb Johnson, you have special teams demons. I don't mean demons in like demonic. I just mean in a playful way. But you have guys who are known special teams contributors. I think that had a lot to do with it. I even had on here that one of the things that the Jaguars are going to have to do is maybe show up some guys from around the league who play special teams, but only if those guys could also be depended on and counted on to play from scrimmage when they're on offense or defense. Tim Jones is fast. I think he's a little bit reliable. And I really do believe that in some of these cases, people stood on the table for a lot of these players and just said, look, the eye in the sky doesn't lie. We graded a little bit differently, obviously, from people who just watch the game from the press box or the stands or on a television set. And there are things about the grades that they probably give these cats that, you know, we're not privy to that information. You would need to not only have the all 22 from practicing the games, but you also need to know what you're looking at based on what exactly they were asked to do. And then it's a matter of chemistry and work ethic and workflow. Those are things that we have no knowledge about, but make no mistake about it. Even though Trent Baalke makes the ultimate decision, I do believe, and I've heard this from NFL players for 20 years, all you need is one dude to come in there and bang and stand on the table for you. They will undoubtedly build their practice squad off of a lot of these players. I'm going to give you my opinion of whether or not I think they made a mistake, even though I admit that there's a lot of information here that we are not privy to in the media. That's for all of y'all that think I know it all. But I'm a little bit shocked with DeAndre Prince. I'm a little bit shocked that they really went out of their way to bring a bunch of veterans in late in camp, all during camp. And seemingly the only one that they're planning on keeping is a dude that ain't going to be ready in Tayshaun Gibson until week 7. So, I mean, maybe it was competition. Maybe it was all about pushing the young players, seeing how the young players would respond. It really seems to me, though, they stood pat in a lot of these positions. They absolutely, in my opinion, kept some guys that I thought would probably be pushed out. Tim Jones is one of those players. I thought he may have been I thought they were maybe going to push him out. Early on, I thought Monteric Brown, even though I've heard for a couple of years they liked him, but all the love you heard them giving Christian Braswell is the way they used to talk about Monteric Brown, and then they were talking about Braswell so much, nobody was really talking about Monteric Brown. But the coaches weren't really talking about any of them other than you kind of, this is what you kind of do. You kind of take who they give you. You can request people after practice if you contact PR the day before, but then they also have a group of players and they tell you who's going to be after practice and who's going to be talking, right? Christian Braswell was one of those players. He was also a dude that they really kept mentioning his name. And you saw in practice where they were overjoyed, it appeared, with the way he was playing on the football field. Darnell Savage getting healthy may have had some things to do with that. Now, with the way that this team stands right now, I'm going to tell you right now, there was a lot of talk about where Darnell Savage was going to play. But now that he's had some contact, he's going to line up right in the slot and be your nickel corner. That's what he's going to be, because the only dude that was doing it was Christian Braswell when he, on the depth chart, because prior to this last preseason game, Darnell Savage hadn't played. This also answers your question in the immediate future about Antonio Johnson. He's going to start 9 times out of 10 right next. He's going to start 9 times out of 10 right next to Andre Sisco. In fact, I'm going to check and see if the Jaguars have updated their depth chart. We're going to discuss that, and then we're going to rank these units. I'm going to rank units. I got 1 through 7 here. I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, the strengths, and there's not a whole lot of gap in the first 3. I'll give you that. There's a little bit of a gap, and then you get the next 3, and then there's a big gap until the last one. That's just in my opinion. This is not from the team. So I'll get that to you in just a second here as we continue this show today, speaking on cuts and all of that stuff here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. And your boy is now looking up the depth chart. We're going to refresh this from yesterday, and we're going to absolutely see what or if the Jaguars have made any changes to this depth chart. We're doing this right now in real time, man. Look at what this says. It says, this is on the Jaguars site, jaguars.com. It says, check back during week 1 for the Jaguars' first official depth chart of the 2024 season. So they don't have one, and they had one yesterday. Isn't that something? They do not have a depth chart up. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own right here. But before we do that, I'm going to fulfill my promise and tell you where I have these units ranked. Number 1 is the defensive line. I think there are 3 great players on that defensive line, and I think they're going to be a strength. It hasn't really been shown that way in the preseason. They might have been a little bit vanilla with all the mixing and matching. By the way, I'm really, really happy for Jeremiah Ledbetter, at least up to this point, because he's still on the team. I'm also happy for Adam Gostis because I thought Gostis was very, very quiet, but I do think that there's a sense of his versatility being able to help him out right now. Number 2 is quarterback. I think you got 2 guys that have played a lot of football, 2 young dudes that look really, really good, and they absolutely fit what Doug Peterson wants. It's just going to all come down to the offensive line when it comes down to measuring or not, whether or not those guys live up to it. So defensive line and quarterback, in my opinion, is 1 and 2. Very, very close behind quarterback. At number 3 is, I'm going to say, the wide receivers. I like their receiving core. I like the group. I like the makeup. Tim Jones being still on the team at number 5, it doesn't change anything for me. But Duvernay is a competitor. Christian Kirk is Mr. Reliable. Gabe Davis will have a chance to sit down in the middle of the defense and run some of those routes and catch the ball where other people have not caught it. And then, of course, I'm crazy about Brian Thomas Jr. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be a superstar here in Jacksonville. I would also mention that Evan Ingram is wide receiver-ish. But the tight ends, I rank 7th. Special teams, tight ends, I rank 7th. Special teams, I rank 6th. Let's get up to number 4 and number 5 before we start talking about who's last. And I think y'all can put it together. If you listen to the Locked On Jaguars podcast, you know exactly where I'm going. And I believe the team might disagree with me. The team likes that group. Let's go with number 4. After the defensive line, quarterback, and wide receiver, we're going to number 4. I think that's the defensive backs. I really believe they're starters. They're going to be fine. They're going to be okay when it comes to the starters. I think their depth has some young, lengthy guys. They're going to lack a little bit of experience, especially until they get Dewey Wingard back. I would suspect that that's probably somewhere before week 4. And then Tayshaun Gibson will add that experience for them, and they're going to have to survive until then unless they add some players. I put a tie with well, not really a tie, but I actually had linebacker number 5. Linebackers number 5, Foyle Oluwakan, Chad Muma's development. I'm putting Yasir Abdullah in that group along with, of course, Devin Lloyd. I still want to see who's going to start next to Foyle Oluwakan at the beginning of the season. I got a feeling it's going to be Muma. Don't hold me to that. And, of course, Ventrell Miller made the team. I'm happy for him. Really, really did what Parker Washington and others did. They took advantage of the offseason conditioning program, and he got it all together. Special teams could possibly be a little bit higher, but it's hard to really gauge that. But I think the Jaguars have a top 7, top 8 punter, and I love this kicker, Cam Little. I love his ability to do it. Now, whether or not with these new rules, they're going to tackle people, I think they have the bodies and the athleticism and the athletic traits to be able to tackle people. And I do believe with Parker Washington and Devin Duvernay, they're going to, and Tank Bigsby, they're going to, with whoever you put back there, they're going to have explosive potential in the return game. So while the special teams is down on this list a little bit, that's not an indictment on how good I think they are. It's just that in the order of importance, and special teams is very important. But we're just talking about 3 or 4 players here as opposed to entire units. There is not that big of a difference between number 4 and the special teams. The DBs, the tight ends, linebackers, special teams, I kind of bunched them all together, right? Last but not least, the offensive line. The offensive line, in my opinion, is the weak link of this football team. It doesn't sound as if the coaches think that. All you heard is they've done a nice job. They've done a nice job. And in this last game, they did. They were going against backups for Atlanta in the preseason finale. But still, it's just a matter of they got to prove it. And they got to stay healthy. And then they got to still prove it. And they got to stay healthy. So that's what it's going to come down to with the offensive line. It appears that they got a group that they like. I think Anton Harrison is the best of the bunch. I think Cam Robinson is a little underrated. And the only reason I say that, it's not like I'm telling you I think Cam is like a world beater, but what I'm telling you is I think he gets flack for a lot of stuff and people don't pay attention to his strength, which is he's a bit of a bully. And the other night when the Jaguars ran around left side, they were having some success, and there's a reason for that. We're going to have to see if these things hold up. Where they need a boost. Yesterday, I talked about possibly going out and getting a veteran defensive end, a veteran edge rusher. It appears that they might still be in the market for that, but another solution to that is this. They have people on this team that can play the big end position that are not listed as defensive ends, and one of them is Eric Armstead, who I fully expect to start. Yasir Abdullah, in a certain capacity on passing downs, can also pull that off. Adam Gostis has played defensive end in a 3-4. Maybe they believe in certain situations he can play a little bit of defensive end in a 4-3. We will have to see. Or they may go out and get somebody. So edge rusher, there's a possibility that they go add a player. I don't believe they're going to touch wide receiver. If something comes up on the offensive line, I think they'll go and gravitate towards that. But for the most part, there aren't a whole bunch of offensive linemen walking around that's going to be able to help you this offseason right now. That's something you definitely have to fix in the offseason or during the season. You have to fix that in the offseason. Okay, now, depth chart-wise, we'll go back through it. I'm going to create one myself. Trevor Lawrence, of course, starts at quarterback. ETN is at running back. Get that out of the way. Evan Ingram's your tight end. We'll get that out of the way. We know that. And then with wide receivers, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, those are your first three. Offensive line from left tackle all the way over to right tackle, we're going Cam Robinson, of course, Ezra Cleveland, Mitch Morse, Brandon Sheriff, and Anton Harrison. There's your offense. I believe, unless they make a change in the next phase of what they call offseason additions, that's when everybody else makes their cut, or they can make a trade, as we said. On defense, we're going Devon Hamilton in the middle with lining up next to Terron Armstead, and then, of course, Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen. First man in, maybe it's Roy Robertson Harris. And if they take out Armstead in that situation, then Armstead comes back in and he takes out one of those edge rushers. And then that other edge rusher comes back in and takes the other guy out. And then you put Devon Hamilton back in maybe, or Roy Robertson Harris back in, and then that's when you give Armstead a blow. I'm looking for 6 or 7 initially. And if you wonder why the Jaguars played their starters for so long, if they were going to thin this thing out this much, maybe what they were doing was getting those guys, getting their win right and getting them ready for the regular season, because there's a lot of talk that they were really, really rotating a lot of guys. And then they played the starters on defense a long time. I think they had to get them game reps and see how they responded to a fast pace. We know who the kicker is, we know who the punter is, and we know who the return guys are. This is fascinating stuff for me, man. Y'all keep up with all the news, because I expect that the Jaguars might be one of those teams that gets a little bit busy and adds 1 or 2 pieces. As they reestablish the practice squad, we'll talk about that too, because those things will tell you a lot about how they feel about who they'll put people on the practice squad that, 1, they feel good about them, and then 2, they feel like they need to do it because that's where they realize their depth will be challenged. All right, so there'll be more to come all week long here on Locked On Jaguars as we continue to discuss the roster. Once we get word of a press conference, we'll find out exactly what the coaches were thinking. We don't have to speculate or guess anymore. But until then, make sure you hit me on social media. Please get into the comments. Make comments on all the platforms. I'll do the best I can to answer. We're going to do mailbag. We'll have a lot of questions answered as this week continues to progress. The Jaguars have made cuts and made waves, and they made actual waves, not W-I-V-E-S, but W-A-V-E-S, because now a lot of the questions that we had have been answered, but we still don't really know the why. So I'll be waiting on Doug Peterson, the head coach, as well as Trent Baalke, to discuss that. Until then, y'all stick with me here on Locked On Jaguars, and make sure you continue to make us your first listen. Now, I did my fantasy draft the other day, so for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we say every day, that's exactly what we mean. Until the next time, you guys take care of each other, and I'll do the same. We'll see you here on Locked On Jaguars.